Next is Top Trumps Doctor Who. Yes, this is a game that exists. You could have spent a few pounds on a physical deck of cards and play the game properly, or you could spend the £30 it was new back then to play it alone against the computer. I only bought this 11 years ago because it was £3 sealed. I even 100%ed it back then. This video will be similar to my Super Butoden video at the beginning of this episode, but hopefully nowhere near as long. At the time this was released, the Doctor Who revival was halfway into its 4th series. The game released the day before Series 4, Episode 7, The Unicorn and the Wasp aired. Due to this, the game's content cuts off the 2007 Christmas special, Voyage of the Damned. Like Dragon Ball, I really love Doctor Who. When I was 3 and 4, my dad used to watch the repeats on TV and had an Earthshock video he watched all the time, along with a taping of the TV film when that came out. After that, I kind of forgot about it until the revival, which I've been watching since day one. And I since went back to remind myself of the classic series too. Favourite Doctor is Peter Davison, followed very closely by Peter Capaldi, who is my favourite actor to have played the Doctor overall. And when we're talking about the revival, Series 9 was the highest point for me so far. Worst revival series in my eyes is not Series 11, it's Series 2. So I used to have a level of opinionatedness that far surpassed how I am with Mortal Kombat and Dragon Ball today. Much of it was Series 2's fault for taking what were minor annoyances with Russell T Davies' era and magnifying them. However, it's been over a decade and enjoying the Moffat era so much mellowed me out a lot. Well, that and Davies' last full series aired when I was 15 and I'm 28 now. My opinions on the Davies era remain much the same, but I just don't get so worked up and angry anymore. It's very embarrassing to think back on. It's why I'm not too fussed with Chibnall's era not doing loads for me. I just had 6 series in a row that appealed very well to me and my tastes, even at their low points. In a series that builds itself on change, to get a stretch like that I enjoyed that much is very lucky and unlikely to happen again. So those for who the current era appeals to can have their new favourite. I sincerely hope you enjoy it while it lasts, and don't let a load of internet loudmouths ruin it for you. But if you want my general opinion on Chibnall's era as of Revolution of the Daleks, compared to the Davies era, it doesn't reach Davies as highs at its best, but it also doesn't reach his lows at its worst. Apart from that introduction, I'm mainly going to be sticking to talking about David Tennant's era, since he was the Doctor when this game was released. That and there are games from the Moffat and Chibnall eras, so I'll talk about them more if I do those. So I go into adventure mode where I have to start as the Doctor and win a game of top trumps against the 5 of the characters in this game. If you've ever played this well-known game, you pick the stat you think will be higher than the same stat on your opponent's card. If yours is higher, you take your opponent's card. If not, they take your card and it's their turn to choose a stat until you beat them again. To win, you have to win every card. This game also includes various special skills that I won't go into, they're mainly stat boosts. If you're playing the Wii version, for the love of God press the minus button to lock the pointer to a cursor. It's very easy to lower your aim to the wrong stat trying to choose with the pointer. And with all that out of the way, the 10th Doctor, played by David Tennant. At the time, I really liked Tennant, and I still do like his Doctor. Back when I was into ranking my favourite Doctors, he was 4th when he was current. But 11 years removed from his exit, his Doctor has dropped in my estimation and will probably be in the bottom quarter. Bear in mind, I do like every Doctor. I didn't used to, but my tastes have changed over 15 years. What really did it was Matt Smith actually. I saw his take on a younger Doctor and I was just left thinking, this is what Tennant should have been. Not exactly, mind you, Smith played the Doctor as trying hard to be cool, while Tennant could genuinely be cool, for example. I mainly think this with how inconsistently the many writers were with him. Some really tried to play up the alien nature, but others would let him down going for generically wacky or generic heartthrob, which were far less interesting. So I've already said that Series 2 is my least favourite of New Who. Considering that's his first series, that's not a good start. I did enjoy his first episode before that, The Christmas Invasion, even though that No Second Chances part was a total fucking lie. He had some good stuff. The Impossible Planet 2-parter was my favourite of that series. Skull Reunion and The Girl in the Fireplace were good too. I also enjoyed some of the finale 2-parter, but the rest was average or terrible. And Series 2 has the largest amount of episodes I just outright hated with 4, almost a quarter of the entire series. I'll go in order. Tooth and Claw I'd just consider a rubbish episode if it wasn't for the Doctor himself. It may have been a plot point in the episode itself that he and Rose were enjoying the carnage and death around them too much, but it went too far for me and makes it the episode where I find the Doctor is most unlikable. I'm including the Twin Dilemma in that statement. Then The Idiot's Lantern, mainly for that awful ending where Rose pushes the abused kid to just forgive his abusive dad using the but family excuse, despite that guy deserving no forgiveness at all. Also, the rest of the episode was rubbish too, and said abusive dad was a ridiculous cartoon character. I know there has been a growing group of people in recent years defending Love and Monsters. I absolutely get where they're coming from, saying that it's a love letter to fandom in general. But I still hate it. Even beyond the infamous paving slab fucker, which is awful, I don't tend to have such a rosy view on fandom that the episode has. There's a reason I don't interact with fandoms except as an observer. In my experience, it's not one Victor Kennedy ruining it for everyone else. It's like 60% Victor Kennedys all rushing to declare the other 59% the bigger Victor Kennedys so they can feel better about themselves, drowning out the other 40% with worthwhile shit to say. Fear Her is a Dr. Light episode starring Rose. That alone would be enough, but it also tries to do another abusive parent storyline, but it just failed for me. So yeah, Rose. I'll get to her more later, but I think Series 2 being my least favourite is easily explained by me saying I greatly disliked Rose. I thought I was one of those who hated the idea of the Doctor being in a romantic relationship, but when I enjoyed watching his relationship with River Song, I realised it was just Rose that was the problem. Which brings me on to Series 3, which I liked more than Series 2, but not as much as Series 1. The Human Nature 2-part was the highlight of that series, along with Blink, and I also enjoyed 42, which I don't think gets brought up a lot these days. The Doctor sulking over Rose was very irritating though. I understand the decision, in that many did grow attached to her, being their first companion, but I feel like even if I did like Rose, I would still be annoyed by it. However, Series 3 has my least favourite finale in New Who so far. Battle of Rancor Colostomy Bags or whatever it's called is definitely the least memorable, least finale, and has the stupidest name ever, but it didn't annoy me. To start, I should say I enjoyed Utopia quite a bit. I really enjoyed Derek Jacobi's Master, and watching the nice selfless Professor Yana have his entire existence erased was one of those, oh, I feel bad for him, but I'm also excited the Master is back moments. But then he regenerated into John Sim. I really didn't like John Sim's Master. They tried to make him the funny, wacky counterpart to Tennant's Doctor, but it fell flat to me and I just found him annoying. I can't remember a single moment he actually made me laugh. Once again, I thought the problem was trying to make the Master funny and wacky, and once again it turned out to be execution, because I really liked Missy after him. And even Sacha Dhawan's Master, who Chibnall wrote as an almost blatant copy of Sim's, did the Sim Master far better. He managed the wacky moments with far more menace than Sim ever did. I should say that I liked Sim's Master more when Moffat wrote him in Series 10, but not a huge amount more. The attempts at humour was toned down so I didn't get annoyed at least. I don't have anything against John Sim as an actor, but he just never clicked with me as the Master. But back to the episodes themselves. I was also fine with the sound of drums, despite Sim's Master. I never liked the additions of the drums in the Master's head or the implication it was always around. I know, time travel, things change, but it really does seem to imply that the Delgado and Ainley Masters also had the drums. Then why did it never come up? It was the last of the Time Lords that I really didn't like. The rapid aging of the Doctor looked silly when it was just Tennant in old man makeup, which is odd when they pulled it off far more convincingly a few episodes earlier, but the tiny CG Gollum Doctor looked so bad. Like, only a few notches above the Merker and the Jellybean aliens from the Three Doctors. Let me be clear, I don't mind bad special effects or low budget stuff. I can watch the original Dalek story even with the cardboard cutout Daleks in the background. The Caves of Androzani is my favourite Doctor Who story despite the rubbish magma creature, but this was very distracting. And the resolution was rubbish. I do like the idea of Martha travelling about future Earth simply telling people the story of the Doctor to keep their hopes alive, but all it results in is the infamous Tinkerbell Jesus. The Doctor essentially spent a year stealing the Master's Wi-Fi so he could do a 15-second magic T-pose. I didn't like it. But then we got Series 4, which I found to be Davy's best. There wasn't a single episode I disliked here, even my least favourites I found okay at worst. I liked the Fires of Pompeii and the 3-part finale a lot, but also the Silence in the Library 2-parter, and Davies finally gets to be a highlight of one of his own series for the first time since Series 1 with Midnight. After an obnoxious romance in Series 2 and the sulking in Series 3, it was so good to see a Doctor and companion team that was simply friends, with no baggage on top of that. It also helps that Tennant had better chemistry with Catherine Tate than he did with Billy Piper and Freema Agyeman. He was let down by the Series 4 specials though. I know they weren't supposed to happen and only exist because it was taking too long to get the new production crew together for Moffat's run, but they still didn't need to be so underwhelming. The next Doctor, I forget exists. The idea of the guy who believes he is the Doctor is interesting, but I just didn't care about the character, and even before Matt Smith was cast, it was obvious he wasn't going to turn out to actually be the Doctor. Add to that the Cyber Yetis and Cyber Megazord, and we get my least favourite Christmas special of Davy's run. Planet of the Dead is the single most boring episode of New Who, with only the Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe coming close. This feels like if they took one of those filler episode 2s from a classic Series 4 or 6 part where they spend an entire episode locked up or whatever just getting exposited at, and stretched it to an hour's length. That we waited 4 months for it and it would be our only episode for another 7 months made it even worse. Not to mention the awful one-off companion. Oh, she only steals because she's a rich, bored adrenaline junkie. That makes it all okay. I should totally give her a flying bus. Trying to compare it to the Doctor doesn't work because she's entirely in it for her own gain. The Wars of Mars was the best of the lot. It was genuinely creepy and we'd had so many moments where the Doctor explains away changing history with fixed points, so it was a cool idea to have a fixed point in our future that the Doctor could change without coming across as disrespectful to real life tragedies. And that ending where the Doctor decides that the rules of time obey him was a great scene. Shame it didn't last and he's just back to normal next episode with all his death-avoiding screwing with history off screen. The End of Time had a decent first half, but was let down by its second. I already didn't care for Sim's master, and giving him Sith lightning powers and making him fly didn't do anything to change that. But it brought back Bernard Cribbins, who was always a high point through both episodes whenever he was on screen. Bringing back the Time Lords but not letting them get out of the gate was a letdown. I don't know why you'd bring back Donna only to have her unconscious in the middle of a street through most of it. I do like how the Fallen Ox turns out not to be the Master's drums, but an unaware Wilf just needing to be let out of the radioactive machine. But that final sequence with the Doctor checking out all his former companions and a couple of us was just the most self-indulgent thing I've ever seen. I should not be wanting the Doctor to just hurry up and die already. Now the big one, I don't want to go. I hate this line. People will defend it as being perfectly in character. This Doctor definitely liked this incarnation of himself in a way not seen since the 6th. Plus, thanks to Davies' listed ages, he had a very short life in comparison to his previous incarnations. And Time of the Doctor would justify it further by having it so that the Doctor was using his final regeneration. But that's the thing, I never had a problem with that line from an in-universe perspective. It's out of universe I had the problem. David Tennant was so hugely popular that he managed to surpass Tom Baker in popularity, and he's still being voted the most popular Doctor today. Due to Christopher Eccleston leaving after only one series, at that point many people who started with New Who would have seen him as the main Doctor essentially. He still has the broadest mainstream appeal of any Doctor to this day. He had the cool factor to bring in one half of the audience, but he also had the looks to appeal to another huge demographic. I mean, while I have seen a lot of people state attraction to every Doctor except William Hartnell, I think it's fair to say that David Tennant was considered the most conventionally attractive Doctor to a massive section of the audience. What I'm getting at is that he was huge. Any actor following on from him was going to have a hard time, and when Matt Smith was announced to be the next Doctor, he was under huge scrutiny from people who weren't just upset that their Doctor would be gone, but there were so many attacks on his appearance. It was much worse than what Peter Capaldi got from some people just for being old. And when these people are at their most emotional, their Doctor is going to be gone forever, they twist the knife by having him say that line. There were many people who refused to give Matt Smith a chance because of that moment. What Davies did there with that one line was almost sabotage Smith's entire run. Had he not had a great first impression in the closing couple of minutes of that episode, it could have been disastrous. Had Series 5 failed to bring in the viewers, I would have laid the blame directly on Davies for that line. One little anecdote. When that episode first aired, I was watching it with my dad, and after half an episode being dedicated to the longest regeneration build-up ever, topping it off with I Don't Wanna Go just made him laugh. Since the exit, Tennant has started a slow slide down my rankings. As I watched Matt Smith's and Peter Capaldi's episodes, I got to see how much I could really enjoy a modern Doctor, and his stuff just doesn't hold up for me as much in comparison anymore. I enjoyed seeing him again in Day of the Doctor, multi-Doctor stories are always fun, but I do kind of wish pop culture would move past his Doctor, because there's been more interesting since. When winning games in Adventure Mode, I get a character profile added to the data core based on one of the cards in the game. I also get some new power-ups. As the Doctor, beating the Slitheen gets me the Transporter skill and adds the Doctor to the data core. Beating Jack unlocks the skill Power Level 1 and adds the TARDIS to the data core. Beating the Cyberman unlocks Energize Level 2 and adds the Werewolf from Tooth and Claw to the data core. Beating Martha unlocks Scanner Level 2 and adds Nurse Redfern from Human Nature to the data core. Finally, beating the Dalek unlocks the Teleport skill and adds the Sonic Screwdriver to the data core. It also allows me to play as the Slitheen in Adventure Mode. It's basically the same, just now I'm also playing against the Doctor. Each character does have their own special skill that can be used when a bar fills, but they're mostly just various stat boosts or whatever. I was never a huge fan of the Slitheen. They were only really memorable because I had the first two part of the new series. I don't hate toilet humour, but I didn't care for theirs. A third episode in Series 1 about a survivor didn't help, although I think I liked that episode more than the Aliens of London for the Doctor's You Just Happen to Be Kind speech and Mickey calling out Rose. I do remember there being a genuine fear though, that due to 3 episodes of the first 13 episode series being dedicated to them, that they were going to be a constant presence in the future. That didn't happen, so it just let them be yet another minor monster fondly remembered by those who grew up with them, which is for the best. Their species was in the Sarah Jane Adventures too, but I've still never actually watched that show. I do think a younger aiming spin-off was a good idea though, since it serves as a good place for Davies to make use of his sillier, goofier, and for lack of a better term, kiddier monsters, like the Slitheen, the Jadoon and the Grask, without alienating the people who don't care for them. That's all there is to say about the Slitheen though. Being Jack unlocks Cloak Level 1 and adds the Slitheen to the data core. Being the Cyberman unlocks Scanner Level 3 and adds the Hoix from Love and Monsters to the data core. Being Martha unlocks a Time Loop skill and adds Harriet Jones to the data core. Why'd they pick that face? Being the Dalek unlocks Power Level 2 and adds a Sycorax ship to the data core. Being the Doctor unlocks Energize Level 3, adds the Slitheen ship to the data core, unlocks a Cyber Sequence minigame from the main menu, and lets me continue Adventure Mode as Captain Jack Harkness. Jack was a fun character back in Series 1. The evolution from cowardly conman to a guy who gives his life to slow down the Daleks while the Doctor works on dealing with them was a good one. His spin-off wasn't announced right away, so I was confused for a bit why he was revived if they were going to abandon him anyway. But then Torchwood happened. That moment in the first episode where out of nowhere Jack is shot in the head was a big shock. It's strange to think now, but there was about a 40-minute period where we didn't yet know that Jack had been made immortal. The issue is, I thought the first series of Torchwood was crap and Jack was one of the less interesting parts of it. I'm not opposed to a more adult-oriented Doctor Who spin-off, but that wasn't the way to go about it. Its best moments were the scenes that showed the moral ambiguity of the main cast, but at the same time it let them off for these moments too lightly. Like Owen using alien pheromones to try and date rape random people doesn't come back to bite him. Yeah, he dies, but at that point in Series 2, that moment is just forgotten and all he got was a stern look and his sex spray repossessed. Or Gwen. That moment where she admits to a boyfriend that she's been cheating on him, but also drugged him with a memory wipe so she can try to get forgiveness and clear her conscience without having to live with the consequences. But she doesn't get the forgiveness she wants before the drug kicks in. It's a great scene and showed how well Torchwood was messing her up. But it does hang over their loving relationship from Series 2 onward. Like, she's insulted when Rhys asks if Gwen is cheating on him with Jack, when Rhys simply guessed the wrong guy. When they're getting married or finding out they're gonna be parents, I'm still thinking, did she ever truly come clean about cheating on him without wiping his memory? Maybe Big Finish did something with that, I don't know. But the big issue with the first series is that you can tell the writers were told, gory, swearing, sexy Doctor Who, and all creed themselves in excitement. They got carried away with what they were allowed to do and that became the focus. The episode about a gas that kills people through sex being only the second episode in the show says it all. That episode awards Jack possibly the worst line in Doctor Who, more than the ones about mind probes or dreams of conquest.
Travel halfway across the universe for the greatest sex. You still end up dying alone.
There wasn't much to say about Jack's Doctor Who return, so I'll cover it all at once. In Series 3 you get an explanation on him being immortal and why the Doctor abandoned him. We also get that face of Bo possible reveal. In Series 4 he's just one of the gang sharing limited screen time with all the other thousands of returns. His short return in Series 12 and Revolution of the Daleks wasn't much either. It was a genuine shock seeing him return, hearing his voice first, especially since he hadn't been spoiled, but he didn't do much. After breaking the Doctor out of prison in Revolution, he also doesn't get much more than generic companion lines. Even his departure is an off-screen voiceover. But back to Torchwood. Series 2 I found a lot better. They toned things down, sort of soft rebooted the rest of the cast to be less terrible people, and we got some better episodes. Something Borrowed was funny, Adrift had that cruel ending. The subplot about Owen dying and coming back but still being dead with most of his bodily functions gone was interesting. We also got some good stuff with Jack and his past, not just in fragments but also that one moment where after Gwen's wedding he just takes out some old photos of his own wedding during the 200 years he was on Earth. We don't need to know who his wife was or anything about her, just him looking at the picture shows what life as an immortal was like for him. The last episode of that series is a bit of a dud though, mainly thanks to Jack's brother Grey. He's barely in it and he's not an interesting character before Jack chloroforms him and puts him in storage, and he's just gone. No comment from Jack about the brother he hoped to rehabilitate someday, most likely being blown to bits when Torchwood Hub is destroyed. It was a shame to lose Toshiko, she was my favourite of the team, but she and Owen were the obvious ones to kill. Owen was already undead and it was only a matter of time until he's put down permanently. Gwen was the main one and Yanto had the romance with Jack, which left Tosh as the only other expendable one. Children of Earth was Torchwood at its best. It's also where Jack is at his most interesting. Of course he did some awful things while working for the original Ruthless Torchwood. Of course he'd have at least one secret family somewhere, and of course thanks to his immortality there's a good chance he'd have a child that would outage him. I like how that affects his daughter too, how she's capable because being related to Jack Harkness is just dangerous by default, and how she doesn't want him around her son because of how much harder it gets to hide that Uncle Jack is actually his ageless grandfather. Children of Earth is what truly fulfills that potential of telling a story in the Doctor Who universe that you just couldn't do in the main show. The scenes where we get the Prime Minister and the others deciding the best way to decide which children are more expendable to hand over to aliens that want to use them as drugs, while also thinking of excuses to cover their own asses, is genuinely one of the most disturbing moments in Doctor Who. You couldn't have a scene where the Doctor fails to stop the army from tearing kids out of their parents' arms. The Parent show doesn't work that way. You certainly couldn't have a scene where the Doctor has to choose between sacrificing his grandson's life or letting aliens take 10% of the planet's children with no alternative because in the main show, the Doctor would always find a third option, or that episode's most important one-off would sacrifice himself to pull off the killing blow or whatever. Yes, there was a Time War, pre-Day of the Doctor, but that was off-screen. And I really enjoyed that ending, where Jack is silently disowned by his daughter and he just has to leave Earth because everyone he was responsible for apart from Gwen is dead. Oh yeah, Yanto died too, I hear a few people were upset. That was a very good place for Torchwood to end. And it should have ended there because Miracle Day was wank. They fell right back into Series 1 habits. Oh, we have a story about how nobody dies no matter how horribly mutilated they are. let's just work out creative ways to kill people, but not really. For one, it was too long. I haven't watched Miracle Day since it first aired 10 years ago, and I honestly can't remember enough story being there to fill 10 episodes. Second is the new characters. Rex was unlikable, Esther was so dull I didn't feel a flicker of emotion when she died at the end. Vera I did like, but they stuck her in the furnace halfway through. Then there was the Oswald Dane stuff. At the time I was just baffled about how everyone becoming immortal somehow meant a convicted child rapist and murderer gains a cult following. In 2021, that part is the most believable aspect, sadly. And then after weeks of build-up, it turns out it was all because a secret society made a giant space vagina bleed Jack's blood. Which leads us to the ridiculous climax of two people bleeding Jack's blood into the same space vagina on opposite ends of the planet, and the paedophile rapist saving the day by suicide bombing it. Oh, and Rex is immortal at the end for a cliffhanger that isn't resolved because that was it for Torchwood on TV. After Miracle Day and Class, I think the lesson is to not have a US-style cliffhanger finale for your Doctor Who spin-offs, because it tends to be a death sentence. But yeah, Miracle Day is one of the biggest drops in quality between two series of the same show I've ever seen. What a disappointing way to go out. As for Jack's victories, defeating the Slovene unlocks scanner level 4 and adds Jack himself. What is that face? Of all possible screenshots to take, why that? Beating the Doctor unlocks a time travel skill and adds the smuggest possible Yvonne Hartman to the data core. Beating the Cyberman unlocks Cloak level 2 and adds Cassandra to the data core. Beating Martha unlocks Power level 3 and adds the Killer Christmas tree to the data core. Finally, beating the Dalek unlocks a Time Attack level 1 skill and adds the Face of Bo to the data core. It also lets me continue adventure mode as the Cyberman. The Cybermen were my earliest memory of Doctor Who and clearest memory I had in that almost decade between my dad watching all the repeats and the start of the revival. As I said earlier, my dad had an Earthshock video he watched a lot, and with my memories at 3 and 4 being so foggy, I misremembered it being a new story every time. A bit of the 5 Doctors and Attack of the Cybermen I'd also seen on TV back then mixed into those memories too. So whenever I'd be reminded of Doctor Who, the 80s Cybermen were the image that came to mind. I couldn't even remember my Doctor right, because it was so long before the revival, my memory had mixed Peter Davison with Mark Strickson and other things that were on TV back then. This meant that when I tried to remember the Doctor, I'd instead end up with the image of Rodney from Only Fools and Horses. But it's for that reason that the 80s Cybermen are still my favourite design. Yeah, the suit itself is pretty shoddy, but I'm merely talking about the helmet. I love it. I love that you can just see the actor's chin to get across that there was still something organic inside. I love David Banks' cyber leader voice and how overly emotional the emotionless cyborg is. If I could own one of those helmets, or had the money to pay someone to make me a perfect replica, I'd jump at the chance. I should say that I'm only talking about the original square helmet. The cyber controller just looked awful. Never mind we have an overweight Cyberman. Removing the pipes and adding the stupid dome just ruined that design completely. The see-through Silver Nemesis versions didn't look as good either. For the longest time I thought the original 10th Planet Cyberman looked awful based purely on still shots I'd seen. It wasn't until seeing them in movement I came to appreciate them and how off-putting they can be, and they've since become a favourite. They made them look really good in Series 10. I'm not a fan of them through most of the Troughton era though, it's their voices. I need subtitles whenever they speak because I can't understand it most of the time. I was really excited for the return of the Cybermen in Series 2, but I was very let down. I hate the Cybermen. For one, their design. I hate the stupid triangular bodies and ugly helmets. The little bit with their eyes and mouth protruding out makes me think of a horse's head. Second, the delete catchphrase. The "you will become like us" from the classic series is good and works as a scary threat. "You will be deleted" is just a straight rip off of the Exterminator and makes these particular Cybermen just shit Daleks, more so than any other version of them. And finally, it meant that the main universe Cybermen didn't appear for years. The redesign from Nightmare in Silver was better, but I feel they just looked a little too skinny. I like the idea of them being able to upgrade themselves to patch out any new weaknesses that get discovered though. Shame it never happened again. I really liked the redesign of the classic Cybermen from Supremacy of the Cybermen. It took that squared helmet design I liked and made the body match it too. The lone Cybermen looked cool too. Even if they didn't amount to anything, yet anyway, I did like the look of the Time Lord Cybermen from the Timeless Children. Putting the silly giant Time Lord collar on a Cyberman is such a ridiculous idea that I can't help but like it. As for favourite Cybermen story, Earthshock is too intertwined with my introduction to the show to not state that. I also like the World Enough and Time two-parter. For an unpopular opinion, I enjoyed Attack of the Cybermen. I never got the idea it was incomprehensible to new viewers because it was actually the first Cybermen story I wound up seeing after the revival started, and I understood it perfectly. My final comment is that I am a little tired of Cybermen/Master series finales. We had 3 in the space of 6 years, let's hold off on it for now. At least do one that only has one of the two first. Beating Jack with the Cyberman unlocks the Dilemma skill and adds the Cyberman to the data core. Beating the Slovene unlocks Energize level 4 and adds the Empress of the Rachnos from the Runaway Bride to the data core. Beating Martha unlocks Scanner level 5 and adds a Cyber Army to the data core. Beating the Dalek unlocks Cloak Level 3 and adds the Mox of Balhoon from End of the World to the data core. Finally, beating the Doctor unlocks the Cyber Scramble skill and adds the Cyber Controller to the data core. It lets me play the interrogation minigame from the main menu and lets me continue adventure mode as Martha Jones. I don't have much to say about Martha. I don't dislike her, but of Davy's main companions, I just found her kind of dull. I genuinely just forget about her sometimes. It doesn't help that she has to stay in Rose's shadow through most of the series. I did like that when she left, it was just a natural decision she made and there wasn't a huge dramatic tearing her from the Doctor or whatever. Don't get me wrong, I like exits like those too, but bear in mind that Martha's was the only one of those for 13.5 years until Ryan and Graham's exits this year. What was a very common exit in the classic series has now become rare in the modern era. Her return mid-series 4 was kind of the waste. In the Sontaran 2-part, she spends most of it captured away from the Doctor with a clone taking her place, and in the Doctor's Daughter she spends the entire episode separated from the Doctor, walking across mud and trying to a fish alien we the audience can't understand. And when she does meet back up with the Doctor, they're just, "Oh hey, you're back," before they drop her off home. I honestly didn't see the point of putting her in that episode. Her 3-episode stint in Torchwood Series 2 prior to that has the same issue. Part of the reason she's there is to be a red herring. When Owen dies, it looks like she might take over the now vacant job as Doctor. But when Owen is brought back the next episode, she's rapid aged and confined to a hospital bed for most of the episode, and she's barely in the one after that before she leaves again. This is on top of also spending the first episode captured too. I feel like they went, here's what we'll do, we'll put her in Torchwood for a bit, we'll put her in Series 4 for a bit, that'll get people talking, and then realised they didn't have anything for her to do. Her returns basically made her Nyssa in Classic Series 19. Now she's here, let's get her out of the way as quick as possible. Might as well talk about Davies' other companion since this is the only game during his era. I hated Rose, as I've already said, but also as I've already said, she's been gone 13 years, so whatever. I don't want to regress that pathetic angry teenager I hate, so I'll make it quick. I find her incredibly selfish, which yes is a flaw that makes her human, but for it to be a proper character flaw the show has to be aware of that. We're supposed to see her abandoning Mickey after he's been traumatised as a good thing, even kicking him when he's down with that "thanks to what exactly" part. The show's refusal to move on from her didn't help things either. Series 3 would be much better with most of the Doctor's sulking removed. When she basically admits she's been put in that parallel universe at risk to send herself back to the main one, and the Doctor just smiles and even rewards her with a clone of himself, I was just glad we wouldn't be seeing her anymore, minor cameos aside. Even when Mickey finally lashes out for being expected to put his life on hold for her while she travels with the Doctor, I get the idea that they want us to feel bad for Rose in that situation, and I don't. I haven't watched an episode with those two in a while, and I probably won't for a while. Watching someone be so unreasonable to a boyfriend and talking to him so awfully while spending more time hanging around with a guy who is clearly interested in her would hit a little too close to home for me right now. But in my case, Rose cheated on Mickey not with the Doctor, but with the equivalent of Adam Mitchell, which brings me to him. I didn't have much to say about Adam because of his 2-episode run. He exists to show the kind of person who wouldn't make a good companion. But thanks once again to recent events in my life, I have very little patience for slimy, self-serving, weaselly little shits named Adam right now. With Mickey, I'm just glad he eventually found purpose away from Rose. His sudden marriage to Martha was definitely unexpected, and I understand people who saw it as a token just put the two black companions together. But I get it. These are two people who had to play second best to the Doctor and Rose, so it makes sense to me that those two could relate to each other. As for Tom Milligan, it makes sense to me that Martha would realise that the Tom who exists now is not the same person from the alternate hell future that she liked first. But then came Donna, who is my favourite of the companions from this era by far. I didn't care for her much in The Runaway Bride, wasn't a fan of the episode in general, and found her a little annoying. So when she was announced to be returning full time, I wasn't exactly thrilled. I was going through a bit of an anti-Catherine Tate backlash at the time. People were still quoting the bothered shit all the time at school, and I was genuinely sick of it. But then she won me over pretty quick. Her and Tennant were a lot of fun together, and it was a shame she only lasted a single series. But if she stayed on after Tennant, we wouldn't have had Amy. Her exit was very similar to Rose's, even reusing the "she's gonna die but only technically," but they did it better with Donna because this time I actually didn't want the companion to die. Explaining her quick temper and shouty moments as compensating to feeling like she doesn't matter before having her become the most important person ever was nice to watch. Although it does bring up a controversial subject, that is, the Doctor erasing himself from Donna's mind to stop her from dying, despite Donna's protests, returning her to her pre-runaway bride self. The main argument is that it robs Donna of her agency, and the Doctor shouldn't be deciding he knows better for her. I don't necessarily disagree, and I absolutely agree with that take on every later usage of the Doctor's mind-wiping ability. But I feel Donna's case is more complicated. The Dr. Donna is simply not the same person as Donna Noble. She only exists because of the Doctor's regeneration energy messing with her body and mind, which is an event she never agreed to. She's fundamentally a different person caused by events beyond Donna's control. I don't feel that Dr. Donna has the right to essentially declare her existence superior and sentence Donna to death after taking over her mind and torching it in like 20 minutes. The Dr. Donna may say she'd rather die, but can you 100% guarantee that Donna Noble pre-Metacrisis would agree to her own death? It's cruel, but in the end I think the Doctor made the right decision. The Dr. Donna was going to be gone regardless, but this way at least Donna Noble is given a chance to live. Being the Slovene with Martha unlocks power level 4 and adds Martha to the data core. Being Jack unlocks Energize level 5 and adds Francine Jones to the data core. Being the Cyberman unlocks Scanner level 6 and adds the Roboform Santa from the Christmas Invasion to the data core. Being the Doctor unlocks Cloak level 4 and adds the Robot Spider from End of the World to the data core. Finally, being the Dalek unlocks the Regenerator skill and adds the Mighty Jagrafest from the Long Game to the data core. It also adds the Toclafane from the Series 3 finale and lets me do the final adventure mode run as a Dalek. I was aware of the Daleks as a kid, but since I was mainly watching 80s repeats and they only appeared 4 times back in that decade, I wasn't exposed to them as much. My main exposure to them was watching my uncle play the old computer game Dalek Attack. As a kid when I did see the Daleks, it wasn't the design that scared me, it was purely the voice. This was back when Roy Skelton was voicing all the Daleks. He was good, but I do think Nicholas Briggs has become the definitive Dalek voice. He's so good at it. The Daleks looked fine in the classic series. I think the only time they looked off was in Resurrection of the Daleks, where there's a close-up shot on a Dalek prop that's very old and clearly on its last legs. But the late 80s gave us some good variants. I like the Glass Dalek in Revelation and the Imperial and Renegade variants in Remembrance. I also like the Special Weapons Dalek from that same story. It was ugly and grimy, but in a good way. When they brought the Daleks back in New Who, they got it right first try with the Dalek design. There's a reason attempts to swap to a new design don't work out, and that's because this one is pretty much perfect. I didn't hate the Moffat ones, but they did look a little awkward. I didn't mind the sloped back or the different colours, they were just too tall for my tastes. Moffat was right when he said they work better smaller, and good on him for admitting his mistake and going back to the previous design. I think the new look in Revolution was better than Moffat's, but not as good as the Davies one. I wouldn't mind a few of them showing up every now and then though. As for favourite Dalek stories, there's the obvious Genesis of the Daleks up there, but also Revelation, Remembrance, Dalek, and The Parting of the Ways were all very good too. I like The Stolen Earth, and I really like The Magician's Apprentice, but I classify those more Davros stories than Dalek. Ignore that I didn't list Genesis and Revelation as Davros stories, these divisions are completely arbitrary and I'm just writing what comes to my head as it does. I feel like this is an unpopular one. I like Resurrection of the Daleks. Yes, it's filled with too much stuff, and it's overly dour, violent and miserable, but that's why I like it. Sometimes I'm in both the mood for something miserable and in the mood for Doctor Who. When it's both, I watch Resurrection. Being Jack as the Dalek unlocks Time Attack level 2 and adds the Dalek to the data core. Being the Slovene unlocks Scanner level 7 and adds the Cult of Skaro to the data core. Being Martha unlocks Cloak level 5 and adds Dalek Sec Hybrid from Evolution of the Daleks to the data core. Being the Cyberman unlocks Power level 5 and adds the Genesis arc from Doomsday to the data core. It also adds Banda Cafolata from Voyage of the Damned. And finally, being the Doctor unlocks the Super Top Trump skill and adds the Emperor Dalek to the data core along with the Heavenly Host. This also lets me play the Memory Matrix minigame from the main menu. That's adventure mode complete, but I'm still not done. I'm only at 90% completion. There are still some cards not added to the data core. That's where the minigames come in. I've been playing these constantly between the adventure mode matches, but I decided to save talking about them until now. First is the Memory Matrix. I'm shown 3 cards and have to memorise the stats before the card are turned, and I have to guess which card has the lowest or highest of a certain stat. After 3, the level increases and I have to do 1 more of these before the next level. This goes all the way up to level 6 where I have to get the right card 8 times. That's 33 of these I have to get right to complete the minigame. It goes on for a while when you're doing it all at once. Clearing it adds the Ood and Sycorax to the data core. Next is Interrogation. I get 2 cards with stats hidden and have to answer true or false to the first card having a higher or lower stat than the other. Once again, levels progress the same way, meaning I have to get 33 of these right. This one goes the quickest of the minigames. Clearing it adds Novice Haim and the Sisters of Plenitude to the data core. Next is High-Low, where I'm shown 1 card, given a stat and made to guess if that stat is higher or lower than on the hidden card. Unlike the others, this one is purely luck based. Once again gotta get 33 right. I actually lose this one a couple times. Clearing this one adds Tallulah from Daleks in Manhattan and an Auton to the data core. Finally, there's Cyber Sequence. It's a shell game. I have to watch 1 card, see them moved around and guess the correct one. It's very easy even without having a pointer on screen to basically cheat. One last time, gotta do it 33 times. Clearing it gets me the final entries to the data core, Brannigan from Gridlock and the Jadoon Captain. What a way to go out. And that's Top Trump's Doctor Who 100% complete. Like with the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game I played, there isn't much to it. It's the cards, but on a TV. I will say it has more to it than Millionaire, lasted longer than 20 minutes and having the unlockables and minigames. It functions fine enough for what it is, but if it weren't for the Doctor Who branding, I'd have never bothered buying it.